Welcome to Anthropology of Tech and the Future of AI. Val, technologist, behavioral scientist, and your chief anthropologist in this journey, the post-algorithmic era. This show is personal exploration of how technology is reshaping what it means to be human. For years, we've optimized the world through algorithms, ranking, predicting, automating everything. Now the real work begins, learning to live meaningfully with intelligence that we didn't evolve to understand. So here in this podcast, we go beyond the hype and we ask deeper questions. We explore how it transforms creativity, leadership, and everyday life. If you're ready to look past the algorithms and into the human story inside the code, you're in the right place. So today, we are diving into one of the biggest and honestly, some of the least understood challenges of our era of fast evolving augmented intelligence, and that space is the organization itself, or the human setting. So not the tools, not the models, but the structure and the culture, the way work actually happens among humans and by humans. Our guest today has a bold point of view on this. You can't fold AI innovation into a 20th century company and magically turn it into the 21st century. This. I'm thrilled to welcome Melissa, the creator of the Hyperadaptive Model, a research-backed framework for AI transformation. Melissa is an author of the forthcoming book, Hyperadaptive, Rewriting the Organization to Become an AI Native Enterprise, with more than 25 years in process excellence, agile organizational transformation. Melissa brings a deeply human perspective and expertise in this critical moment of change. Melissa's work focuses on people, on the culture, and the systems that need to evolve for technology to actually do the work and to stick. Melissa, thank you so much for joining this podcast today.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed our conversation prior to recording, and I think your listeners are in for a treat for the conversation today.
Thank you so much. So first, I wanted to talk to you about the hyperadaptive model and organizational culture. Let's start with that core idea that the 20th century organization model simply cannot support the new augmented intelligence technology. What are the biggest assumptions we still cling to that really need to be rethought? Why is letting go of them so hard for leaders?
Yeah, there's things in our society that are just how things operate. And so we don't even really think about their origins. And one of those that I feel like is embedded into organizations is something called Taylorism. And this goes back to 1911 and John Winslow Taylor, who established management theory. You have to think back to 1911. We had the assembly line starting to take hold. And so what management theory said is that there was the management class and the laboring class. And it was the management class duty to find the one best way of doing things and impose it onto the laboring class. And I don't know about you, but I see the whispers of that, the remnants of that in our organizations. That's one aspect that we may not even recognize is affecting how we're operating today. And then the second one is functional silos. And so these emerged after World War II as enterprises were starting to grow bigger and multinational, and functional specialization made sense. But when you think about those two things, the first of the management class knowing the one best way, nobody knows the one best way. And the opportunity with AI is to do infinite testing to to suss out that nuance. And then as far as the functional silos are concerned, we're moving way too fast to have that kind of bureaucratic infrastructure where we go up the chain and we go down the chain. And I really believe that those operating models aren't going to serve us well in the organization.
I really love bringing in history into the conversation, and also the organizational structure that is dictated by some social structures and developments. So your model shifts organizations from this view of linear hierarchical structure into more of the value stream or orchestration models. From the perspective of the everyday employee, what does that shift feel like? How do their routines, collaborations, and a sense of professional identity start to change in a truly AI native environment?
Yeah, I love the question, and thank you so much for asking it. The way I define value streams is organizing in a way like along a customer journey, or from concept to cash is another way to think about it. I like to use the use case of a bank, and the bank is focused on newly graduated individuals, and they might have very particular needs, and you get everybody together who is servicing that individual. So when you're thinking about value streams, first of all, you're thinking about how your routines are changing. So you might stop spending your days doing what I call work about work. So you're hunting for information, you might be chasing approvals, updating spreadsheets. The average worker spends 9.3 hours searching for information. About the roots of that, it's because of these silos and because of the organizational structures. We're not working next to the people that really makes sense. So I think that's the first thing that's going to change for individuals. I feel like the second thing for an individual is around collaboration. So it becomes much more dynamic. Instead of becoming in like being in a fixed departmental box, like, oh, I'm a marketer and I'm in the marketing team. I think we've got more fluid teams and dynamic teams. And it starts to feel a lot less rigid. We're going to where the need is. And let's just say that through the help of AI, a new customer need emerges, a new team might form around it, swarm it. And we're just in this fluid environment. And of course, when you think about these two things, then you can imagine the shift that happens around your professional identity. And we might have thought of ourselves as, oh, I'm a marketer. I process invoices. And that starts to shift to become more about what you achieve as an individual or as a team. I'm on the team that's improving our customer onboarding. And so the value is really shifting from your tasks to your impact. And I believe that all of us will start to develop a portfolio around what we've accomplished, our skills, and it won't be so constrained or limited to the department that we represent.
That is super interesting. And as an anthropologist, I asked myself, does that bring us closer to what's inherently more human, what we experience as more of a natural environment for us to thrive? For example, being mission focused, you are, hunting together or you are gathering together. So you get the nutrition for your extended family or for the group that where you belong to versus you are assigned a specific task and you kind of follow through, but then day in day out you are actually disconnected from the core mission of the group that you essentially are part of, which I think can be problematic for humans, for our sense of well-being, for our sense of belongingness and purpose. It's interesting because there seems to be this tension. So you're speaking about the scientific evidence of how much time people spend, for example, retrieving information. And now I do feel like there is this tension between what we know from a science standpoint and how it's actually applied in the real world within the organizations. For example, a lot of companies are still really focused on tools instead of culture. From your experience, Melissa, what is the most stubborn culture blocker that you see? Is it fear? Is it lack of psychological safety? Or is it something deeply systemic?
So I'm going to answer your question about the cultural blockers. First, I want to revisit what you just said because it was so cool when you were talking about anthropology. And I don't know if Unilever has an anthropologist on their staff, but they have this amazing program called the Future Fit Initiative. And what it says is it says that we've hired good people and we know that jobs are going to change. We don't quite know how they're going to change. As find have individuals identify their purpose and then use AI to help them find a role within the organization that aligns to their purpose. And they've got this great piece of software called Flex that allows people to search through the projects that are going on, the initiatives that are going on, and think of it like an AI dating site for jobs where they match your skills with the opportunities at hand and that align to your purpose. And I feel like that has some really interesting tie-ins to what you were saying around anthropology.
Wow, that sounds so functional.
Yeah. So thank you for allowing me to share that. And then going back to your question around what's the most common cultural blocker that I see with people trying to make this shift into an AI native or AI forward organization. I think one of the blockers, of course, is psychological safety, and that fear of displacement is so real, and a lot of leaders just aren't addressing it. They're choosing either to ignore it or, quite frankly, they're fanning the flames. I see these headlines every day. Amazon is going to lay off 40,000 people because of AI. Shopify says we're going to be AI native or else. And I feel like those headlines are not helpful. They're not helpful because people are already afraid. And so that doesn't create the psychological safety that people need in order to make the change. The second thing I think is a blocker is organizational inertia, and who are comfortable with change, and there's people who aren't. And those people who aren't comfortable with change, quite frankly, they're going to keep doing things the way they've always been done. And is organizational inertia. You get enough people sitting still and saying, wait this out, then the change isn't going to happen. So I feel like those are some of the cultural barriers, including information hoarding, budgeting. I mean, there's incentives. These are all the different ways that stymie organizations and keep them from moving forward.
So tell us a little bit more about the Acceleration Hub
Mhm.
that you launched that offers a different kind of support structure. How would you describe its role inside the organization? Is it closer to the center of excellence, or is it more of an organic, community driven function?
Yeah, and just to give your listeners some context, the hyperadaptive model moves organizations from what I call this linear organization, which we've talked about, strategy to execution, concept to delivery, into a more AI native sensing and responding kind of a complex adaptive system type of space. And we do that by spinning up several support structures, one of which is what I call the AI Acceleration Hub. And so I sometimes do reference it as a center of excellence just because some people have that framing. But I love your idea of a tribal elder. And I feel like that's much closer to what we're talking about. The AI Activation Hub is really designed to be part of the neural network of the organization. And it's a connector and it's an enabler. So if you think about how learning will happen in the future and how it's already happening to some degree, we take it in small bites. It's, just in time, just enough, just for me. The days I believe of sitting through 2-day training, it's still happening out there, but I feel like its days are numbered. And in its place, we'll have what I call atomized learning. And we are looking to establish a network within the organization through which these tiny bites of information can find their right owners. And the AI Activation Hub is the enabler for that.
So let's talk a little bit about learning and the role of learning and adoption in the human centered shift that we're unpacking here. So you said that applied AI actually requires a totally different kind of learning. So how is this atomized learning different from, you mentioned, the classic 2-day corporate training? And what does it look like when it actually works in practice?
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that atomized training and the shift that's taking place. I think the big thing is understanding that learning has moved from static curriculum-based learning. And there is still some of that. There's some aspects of AI that stand still enough that we can say, here's what an LLM is. It stands for a large language model, and here's the foundational elements of how an LLM comes together. Go ahead and do some static training around that. But the actual rollout of AI and getting people to use it is what I call dynamic training. And it's continuous, it's contextual, and it happens within the flow of work. And so the challenge is to create what I call a learning arena. So the conditions, and this is where that AI Activation Hub comes in again, because they're helping to create the conditions for this learning arena, peer to peer learning. And I like to talk about AI and prompting and things like that, like drawing a cat. Like, if I asked you to draw a cat, your picture of a cat would look totally different than if I drew a cat. Mine would just be like a little round head with some pointy ears because I'm not that good at drawing a cat. And you can teach people skills on how to draw, but the end result, that end product, is still going to look pretty different. And I feel like the same thing happens with AI. Like, you can go ahead and quote unquote teach prompting, but the output from the LLMs is going to look totally different depending on the person, the context, what they've done in the past. And so I just feel like learning and teaching around that needs to look pretty different.
Absolutely. I'm also just a huge fan of cat metaphors and cats in general.
Love it. Do you have a cat?
I have 2 cats, yes. Do you have a cat?
I have a dog. He's hanging out back there.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, Melissa, you talked about the power of social learning, prompting parties, peer champions, communities. What kind of rituals or community practices have you seen really help early adopters spread this energy and know, um, you know, sorry, and
I feel like this is the piece that a lot of organizations, they're trying to do it and they're feeling around in the dark. Like, I was just talking to an organization this morning, and they were saying, well, we've done some lunch and learns, and we have this centralized group of AI enthusiasts, and we try and have them go out and spread it to the organization, but it just isn't working. And so I think what organizations need to realize is that this is a very deliberate and structured thing that needs funding, support, people's time, people's energy. Best practices look like a dedicated block of time, 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is, like let's just say on a Thursday, where you experiment together with your team and exchange best practices. That's essentially what a prompting party is, except it sounds a lot more fun. It sounds like fun. And then, um, and then maybe you have failure Fridays where you do the same thing. Maybe you take an hour and you say, "Here's all the stuff that I tried that didn't work." Because I think it's so important to establish that it's safe to share what didn't work. And that's part of that psychological safety as well. So, those are some ways. Establishing Slack channels where people can share best practices in the model. I say spin up your AI leads and name them. So people have these enthusiasts, but they don't have structural programs to support them, to teach them how to spread what they know throughout the organization. If you're in the AI world, a lot of people point to Moderna. They've been doing great things with AI for a while. And one of the things that they discussed, and they then chose their 100 power users out of this prompting contest and had them share their power prompts with the organization. And in conjunction with that, they built an internal forum that grew to over 2,000 active weekly users. And that forum became that tribal knowledge where the best prompts and practices were shared. And that's really how you scale enthusiasm into a real capability.
I love that tribal knowledge reference where it becomes the part of the collective culture. It really becomes the integrative function of that culture rather than imposing something artificially. It lives within itself.
Mhm.
which is what we ultimately want if we want to shift the ways of working towards. My next question is going to be around what you refer to as the AI learning flywheel. So, as it kicks in, leaders suddenly have a lot of ethical and cultural responsibility. So, from your perspective, what do leaders need to do to ensure this shift stays human oriented and it doesn't turn into this blind automation effort?
Yeah, I really appreciate your bringing this up. So many people that I talk to see automation as this panacea, that it's going to solve all of these things and we can just quote unquote automate our processes. I think we're all coming up the learning curve on what exactly that means because we've been sold the headlines that you'll be able to automate everything. But when you slow down and you think about what we're automating tasks, we're automating processes, we're potentially automating decisions and potentially human interactions. And when you think about automating, especially processes, but decisions in human interactions, you better take a pause and try and find that sweet spot between AI and human and keep a human in the loop wherever anything ethical is at play. If something could go drastically wrong, you need a human in the loop. And what we know from previous attempts at automation, whether it's factory to DevOps is a way to automate the software delivery pipeline, is we know that roles switched from doing a lot of the tasks to building, monitoring, and maintaining the automations that did the tasks. And that's really where you're monitoring those automations for drift. You're keeping a human in the loop to measure and see how those automations are doing. And you've got to be just very cognizant about your decision frameworks. Make sure they're documented. Make sure people know how decisions are being made. You still, in many industries, the high assurance industries, you need that traceability. And there's a lot of buzz in the circles that I'm in around personal use of AI on your own devices and how if you're still logging in to a company account, those could be subpoenaed. Those aren't protected information and people could go after you and see what you're doing on those devices. All right, there was a lot there. I think there's another responsibility that leaders need to take around transparency of role changes as we're thinking about this cultural shift. It's a reality that roles will change. And I feel like leaders need to take responsibility for that, anchor people in why we're doing this automation and communicate that and support their workers as they're making this transition.
That is a great point, Truancy. That is change management one-on-one as well.
Right.
And we are all going through this massive change as a society. So transparency is absolutely an important keyword in this process. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the strategy, vision, and meaning. You often emphasize the importance of defining
Mhm.
an AI North Star. So something that is human centric, it's beyond ROI. What does this kind of narrative unlock inside an organization that a standard business
Mhm.
case never could?
Yeah, this is another aspect of doing change successfully that I feel like most organizations are missing. Moderna, I'm going to pull on them again. They're doing it really well. They stated in AI North Star that they were going to release 15 new drugs in 5 years. So if anybody's familiar with the pharmaceutical industry, on average, it takes 10 years to release one drug. So now they're saying they're going to release 15 in 5 years with the help of AI. Now that is a mission that many people can get behind. And because AI has so many use cases, right? You can use it for almost anything. It also helps people filter through their use cases to figure out which ones they should prioritize. What automations should we prioritize? If we've got a researcher who's trying to use AI for research, it's like, okay, is this one of the new drugs that will help us create that mission? And it just anchors people in the organization's philosophical stance. Like, this is why we're using AI. And it moves it away from we are using it to achieve productivity. We're going to use it to reduce headcount. Middle managers, guess what? You're gone. It's more in the realm of the Unilever example we were exploring, where they said, we know we have good people, and this is why we're using AI. I feel like it also inspires people to take the time to learn the new tools. So it gets them to move against that organizational inertia that we talked about. If I have the choice between doing what I've always done or doing things a new way, if I have a compelling reason to do it a new way, I'm more likely to do it. And I feel like just anchor yourself in your North Star, anchor yourself in why you're using AI, and it'll help to shift the culture of the organization.
That is powerful. Your background in Agile is woven throughout this hyperadaptive model. What's the single most important lesson from Agile or Lean that leaders should carry into AI transformation?
Yeah. I feel like it's somewhere around small iterative changes. So, I spent 6 years at Scaled Agile figuring out how to roll Agile out to the world's largest organizations. And that was a masterclass in how complex organizations can change and what it takes to make them change. And there are a lot of failed implementations out there. So I also got to learn from the mistakes and evolve these models of change so that we'd have a higher success rate this time around. So I see a lot of organizations, they're trying to boil the ocean, and they hear from the headlines that this automation can happen. They hear about the orchestration, and they try and bite off too much. I was just talking to an organization this morning, and we were talking about where they might be a year from now. And they were a little bit discouraged because I was like, well, maybe you've got AI augmenting some of your decisions. They're like, oh, Melissa, if that's all we've done in a year, we'll be really disappointed in ourselves. Like, we want the automation, we want like radical change, but in reality, change doesn't happen. I mean, it can happen that way. I like to say it's earthquake and erosion, right? It either like happens all at once in a big radical change. But when you think about earthquakes, they come with a lot of collateral damage. So erosion, like this idea of like you're going to do it small and iteratively, it actually de-risks. So we want to do it incrementally, do it continuously, learn as we go, de-risk it, knowing that doing it this way also allows us to pivot as AI changes. Because if we do a big approach, oh, we're going to orchestrate all these automations, by the time you finish that project, AI will have changed completely. And you might be dealing with an entirely different tech stack.
What of the leaders whose companies are stuck in sort of pilot purgatory? So endlessly testing,
Yeah.
never really scaling. What's the very first conversation leaders should be having with their people to start breaking out of that cycle?
hmm I think they need to stop making it about the tool and start making it about the business outcomes. And the 15 drugs in 5 years, that's a business outcome. It's a North Star, but it's also a business outcome. Where are you stuck? Where's the friction? And think about within that, if it's to improve the customer experience, what is our stupidest, most broken process? And start to fix that. Start small. Start and what that also allows you to do is if people are fixing their one most stupidest broken process, they're actually going to learn AI as they're fixing that process. And what that starts to do is it starts to build that muscle memory around this is how I take a look at a process. This is how I have like how I visualize it. This is how I determine where the points of friction are, where the waste is, where the handoffs are, where the delay is. Ah, this is how I inject AI into that process, given AI capabilities today. Because what we know for sure is that we're going to have to do that activity over and over again. So a year from now, as capabilities change, we're going to have to revisit those same processes and say, okay, given today's capabilities, how do we fix today's friction points? And I feel like that's a great mindset to be in if you're a leader trying to ignite AI usage in your organization.
Start small and focus on the real problems. Don't try to boil the ocean.
Well put.
It's been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much again for sharing your expertise. And I hope we can continue this conversation in the
Thanks
future.
so much, Valerie. And if anybody is ignited by what we've been talking about, again, Valerie mentioned the book. It's Hyperadaptive Rewiring the Organization to Become AI Native. It's available for pre order out on Amazon. And there's tons of free resources out on my website, which is hyperadaptive.solutions.
Thank you so much, Melissa.